This is our next project, which is emphasis and contrast. So we're showing emphasis by having something be more predominant than everything else in our design. And we also are showing contrast by contrasting colors. So we want to make sure that we have good contrast between colors. So you should have already gone to the Adobe color wheel and chose your colors with complementary colors of what you're going to use. So make sure that is open as you're working on this project, and then we are going to start with a new document in Illustrator. So open Adobe Illustrator, go to File, New. We're going to choose Print. You're going to name it with your first name, underscore. We'll name this one Emphasis. And then you're going to change the points to inches. We're going to make this, we're going to make it 4 inches by 5 inches. For the sake of this project, it depends on your sketches that you did in pre-planning whether you're going to use portrait or landscape. If yours is more vertical, I would go with portrait. If yours is more horizontal, I would go with landscape. So that's your choice. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to use portrait and create. Now we have our document. First things first is we want to grab our colors from the color wheel. So we are going to go to our rectangle tool and we're going to click and drag a rectangle up in the corner. We're going to open up Adobe color wheel and copy the hex code of the color we want. Now back in Illustrator, we are going to double click on our fill color, paste in that hex code, and say OK. It's important to make sure that we bring the stroke on top and say no stroke so that when we're using this as an example, we're not adding a stroke to our design. I'm going to copy and paste this square so we don't have to make it again. So Command or Control C and then Command or Control V to get another square. And go ahead and grab your other hex code. So I'm going to grab this one for now. It's my complementary colors that I'm using. You can use 2, 3, or up to all 5 of these colors. Your choice how many of these that you want. So I'm going to once again make sure the fill color is on top, double click, paste in my hex code. So in the color picker, here's that hex code. Say OK, and there's the other color I'm going to use for my color scheme. Now what we're going to do is we are going to start with our base, our background color. I'm going to move this out of the way just a tad for now. Alright, so once again we're going to go to our rectangle tool and we're going to click and drag a rectangle over the entire artboard. This is the last color that I chose, so it's going to go on there. It's not the color I want, so I'm actually going to, with this selected, I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool and click on the more teal color. That's going to be the start of my design. Now we're going to use a new tool you haven't used before. So I've already clicked on it. So the eraser tool is on your right side of the column. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down on the tool panel. If you click and hold on that eraser tool, there's also the scissor tool and the knife tool. So click on the knife tool and we are going to just simply, and it's up to you, the design that you want to do, how you cut up this board. But for me, I kind of did waves, and you can do them closer together, farther apart. It's up to you. So I just kind of simply just drag, my fingers still on the mouse, dragging these lines through my design. You can make them smooth as you want. You can make them more jagged. It is up to you. So once again, you're clicking and holding on the mouse and you're dragging these lines around. So on my first opening one, I did have a little mistake on that one. So one of them ended up being kind of jagged, but here I'm trying to make it a little bit more smooth. So I think that's good for now. We'll go with this. So I'm going to go to my selection tool and show you what happens. Click off so none are selected. So notice we now cut this into a bunch of pieces, which makes a really cool design element you can add to your work moving forward. But for the sake of now, I'm going to keep all those together. I want to transition this top color with the bottom. I want the bottom to start out white. So I'm going to I clicked on my bottom shape, double click on my fill color, go to white, which is all the way in top corner. 6Fs is the hex code for white. Now I've got my teal, white, and I've got a bunch of shapes in between that I want to transition from this darker teal to the lighter teal, to the white. So I'm going to, with my selection tool, click and drag. So I'm holding my mouse down, selecting all these shapes. Now I'm going to go to Edit, Edit Colors, and there's a lot of options you can play around with here. But for this project, we're going to go with blending vertically. So we're blending from top to bottom vertically, and it's going to transition those colors nicely from the teal to the white. If we did not want it to be so dramatic, so let me go back to undo, and let's go, I'm going to go back one more step. So I've got this bottom color selected. Double click on my fill color, and maybe I just want just a slight variation. So I'm going to go about right here, not all the way to white, maybe a little bit more. We may leave a little bit more transition. So it's not quite white. Now I'm going to select all of those shapes, go to Edit, Color, and Blend Vertically. So now we don't have such a dramatic transition, but a nice subtle transition gradient between the top one to the bottom one. Next, to get that paper cut out look and make sure, give it a little bit of dimension and look like they're on top of each other, we are going to go to Effects, Stylize. There's two Stylize in the Illustrator Effects, and there's also Photoshop Effects. So we're going to go to Stylize in the Illustrator Effects, and we're going to go to Drop Shadow. As you can see, we have a really nice drop shadow on all of these. It gets a little crazy in here because our layers are not in order from top to bottom. Don't ask me why. I don't understand why it doesn't give it to me in order from top to bottom. I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. But before we do, let's check out our drop shadow window box. So there's preview, so we can see what we're doing. If you don't see what it looks like, the preview button is probably not selected. So make sure you're selecting that preview button. Now, we can change the opacity. We can bring that opacity down. We can have it the Y of the X offset, change that. The direction that the light is going will change the direction that the shadow is going to be. So I'm actually going to keep it about where it was initially. We can change the blur, so we can decrease the amount of blur that it has, and we can also change the mode. So right now it's at multiply, and you have a lot of options to play around with. I'm going to really keep it close to the default. I'm not changing I did change the opacity. I'm not going to put it back. And I'm going to say OK. Now, as you can see, these are kind of out of order. Really crazy how this does that. So I'm going to go with my selection tool. I'm going to click off so nothing's selected. I'm going to click on the first one that's kind of out of order in my layers, and I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, and Send it to Back, which if you notice, just for the sake of being fast, check out the shortcut. I'm working on a Mac, so it's Shift, Command, and then the bracket on the left. So I'm going to just go ahead and click for that one, but for this one I'm going to use a shortcut, and this last one I'm going to use the shortcut. So now they're in the order in the layers panel that they're supposed to be. Don't ask me why it does it out of order, but that is that. All right, so next what we're going to do, we need to lock this layer so that when we're working on the other layer, that we're not messing with this with all of the shapes in it. But we're going to go back and forth between locking different layers, and I'll explain why later. So I'm going to double click on this layer. And once again, let me show you where this layer panel is. Over here, we're going to go about halfway down. Here's our layer. If you do not see it, you're going to go to Windows and the Layers panel. Layers window, open that up. So here's our Layers panel. I'm going to double click and rename that to Background. There's our background layer. I'm going to lock that layer, and I cannot do anything to that layer if I wanted to. It won't let me do anything. So we need to create a new layer, which is down here. We can also go to these and do a new layer here as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do things. There's never a right or wrong way, just a faster or shorter way sometimes. So I'm going to double click on this layer and say this is my elements layer. So now, as you notice, this one is not locked. The eyeballs on each, we can turn an eyeball off if we want to. So we can work with that, and we can lock and unlock. So I need to make sure that this one is grayed out. My elements layer has a highlight on it. That means we're working on it. If it was still on my background layer, I still couldn't get any work done. So make sure it's on your elements layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take another box and we are going to cover the entire artboard. I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool and click on that color. Even though that background layer is locked, we can still use those colors for picking up. So we cover the entire artboard with the contrasting color. Now we need to add either the text or design that you decided to add. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my type tool, click on here. So this gives me lorem ipsum as a placeholder text. I'm going to go, just for starters, I'm going to change this to like 250 right here in my character panel, 250 points. Make that really large. Go to delete or backspace and do an M for my name. So I'm going to have an M on here. I'm going to drag this down so we can see it. But for the sake of the design and the emphasis that we're trying to get, we need a thicker display font. So we're looking primarily for a sans serif. It doesn't have to be a sans serif, but a really nice thick display font. So this one's a Star Wars font. I downloaded. This one might work. This one would be nice. The one I used for the example was another one I had gotten off the internet. So this is a really fun font to work with, and it will work well with what we're doing. So there's our M. We don't have to worry about anything else in our character window because all we're doing is an M. So next what we need to do is we need to change this text into a shape. So to do that, this text box needs to be selected without the text being highlighted. Go to Type, Create Outlines, and now it's a shape. So we can resize it, we can move it, we can add a stroke, different things. We are going to need two of these. So I'm going to copy this one. Well, oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself. So select it again. I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard so I don't distort anything and make it just a tiny bit larger, just for the sake of filling up my artboard nicely and giving really beautiful emphasis to this design. Now, I'm going to copy and paste this in, put this one off to the side for now. We'll use that in a minute. Now what we're going to do is we are going to subtract this M from our background. So because I have this background layer locked, if I go and I click and drag over the two pieces, all I've selected are the two pieces. If that background layer is not locked, when I go and select those two pieces, I now selected some of those background pieces and it's going to affect what we're trying to do. So I'm going to click off, make sure nothing's selected, lock that background layer again, and click and drag over the two pieces. If we look over in our Properties panel down to the Pathfinder tool, that second option is click to minus the front. So my M's on the top, and we're going to minus it from that solid piece that we covered our artboard. So I'm going to click the minus, and we'll see that background come through. Super cool. It looks fun. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to add our drop shadow effect. So the cool thing about this is now if we go to effects, we can go to stylize, we can do drop shadow again. Our default, the settings we just changed or whatever will pop up, and we can change it if we want it different. But for the sake of design, you should have the light coming from the same direction. Your drop shadow should be the same. So we can also, for the sake of being fast, up on the top it says drop shadow. This is like the last effect that you used, and it is the same setting of the one you just used. So you can go ahead and do that and say OK, and we've got that drop shadow applied to this top layer. So before we go any farther, the benefit to having these layers is I'm now going to lock this elements layer, unlock my background layer, and now if I wanted to, I can move these background pieces around a little bit. So if I wanted to play around with them, maybe bring in some more color in here, maybe bring them a little bit tighter. So I'm moving these pieces around, and I'm not worried about this top option because we can bring those in. So if that's something you wanted to bring them a little closer, if you wanted to spread them out, if you want to move them around, you've got that option, okay? So we could not do that as easily if we did not lock and use separate layers, okay? So I'm just playing around with it to where I like it. All right, so awesome. Now we need to go back to the elements layer. I moved this one off down here. I'm going to move that back just because I don't like us seeing a lot of things out of order. Okay. All right, I'm going to lock this background layer back up. Now I can't do anything to those. I can't do anything to any of the design because they're both locked. Go back to the elements, unlock that, and click on my elements. So now we want to do one more layer, rectangle layer. We're going to cover the entire artboard again. And I want this one to be white. So I'm going to double click on my fill color, bring it to white, say OK. And for the sake of what I need to do next, I'm going to move that to the side. I'm going to move my M into place. And what this is going to do is we need this M to be a little bit larger than the M behind us. And how we're going to do that is we're going to add a stroke to it. So I'm going to go over to my properties panel, stroke in the appearance, and add a stroke. I don't want to add so much stroke that I lose this definition in here. So I don't want to do this. For this design, we did that on our wow text. But I still want a little bit of that top panel coming through. So I'm going to add that. And so this, where this line is, it's actually the shape. And my stroke is on the outside. So if I went to try and cut this out of here, it would actually still be the same size as this and not include the stroke. So we need to make sure we include the stroke, similar to when we worked at the wow text. So I'm going to go to Object, Expand. I want to expand the fill and the stroke together, so I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to go to my Properties panel, down to Pathfinder, and I'm going to click to unite all those pieces so there's one piece. Now I can bring this white panel in. This is going to be my top layer minus the text I'm going to add in a minute. But it's on top of my M, so we can't use that Pathfinder option minus the top because our M is underneath. So we're going to go to Object, Arrange, and just send it back. Don't send it all the way to the back. We just want it strictly underneath this M. So it's selected. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the top option. Now they're both selected. And my Pathfinder option in the Properties panel is there. And I'm going to click the minus front. So now we've got a nice transition from our top layer to our little highlighted area here, and then our background. I do want to add a drop shadow to this, so we can go to Effects and Drop Shadow. This is a drop shadow we already have, and say OK. Lastly, we're going to add our text to the top. So I am going to go back to my Type tool. If you notice, if I click on here, it's going to be the size that I created for this, the 250 points. We can change that before you do it, or you can go in here and kind of eyeball and get a rough idea of where you want to start and change that size. I'm going to stick with the same font. You can choose to change it if you want. I'm going to do Mrs. Mallard, all uppercase, and without the dot in there. Just for design purposes, I don't want the dot in there. So I'm going to go to my selection tool, move my text, and I want to align it up with the edge here. So we're thinking about our alignment. For the sake of time, you already know how to create your rulers and drag in guides to help you. So I'm just going to eyeball this for the sake of time. I'm going to highlight. I went back to the Type tool, highlight the entire text, and now I'm going to bring that down till I line it really nicely on the other side. Next, black does not really go with the design we're trying to go with. So let's go to our eyedropper tool, bring out that kind of burnt orange that is a nice contrast with our teal. And now we have our contrast there with the white as well. So we can leave this as a text. We're not going to do anything with it. We can add a drop shadow to it if you want. I did not do it for my design, but you can play around with that. I just like the clean look and separating that from our emphasis, what we have up here. Lastly, what I want you to do is you need to make sure you're saving this, you're saving it the correct way. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. You want to save it as an AI file. Make sure when you set it up, you should have done your first name _ emphasis. Check where you're putting it. Right now mine's in the downloads. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my external hard drive and go to my Principles of Design. And this is our emphasis and contrast. Create, and this is where I want to put it, and then Adobe Illustrator file AI. Save and OK. Make sure that you are putting this AI file in your OneDrive account or on a flash drive so you don't lose your work. This is a multiple day project. I do not want you to lose it. Next, you're going to go to File, Export, Export As, and make sure the file name is correct. Make sure it's in the right area. Make sure that you change the format to a JPEG, and then I want you to choose Use Artboard. The purpose of this is we have things off the artboard. So we have our color palette over here that we are working with. Sometimes you might have artwork that's going off the edge. Make sure that you are saying Use Artboard so those things that are all outside of our artboard area don't get saved on this JPEG. Go to Export. Change your quality to 10, change your resolution to 150, and then say OK. Lastly, I wanted to talk really quickly if your emphasis, if you have more than one object. So say for your emphasis, actually, let's do this so you can see the whole entire thing. I am going to leave Mrs. Mallard there, but I'm going to delete this one, delete this one. Now, I'll move this off to the side for a second. I'm going to go ahead really quickly, and I'm only going to do one layer. I'm not doing the double layer, but you would do the same thing that I did with the M as far as making sure you copy what you're working with and putting it off to the side to add the stroke and expand it. So say you are doing a number. So some of you are doing your sports number, or a number of professional player. I'm going to do 23, Michael Jordan, one of my all-time favorite basketball players. I think the best basketball player of all time. I know that's arguable. I don't like how far away these are, so I'm going to go to my type tool, highlight them, bring them closer together. This VA is a tracking. Really, it's kerning right now because it's only 2 letters, 2 numbers, and I'm going to bring those together. I'm liking that much better. So now I've got them closer together with proximity. It looks really good. You need to go to, once again, you need to go to type, create outlines. So now it's a text, okay? They are grouped together. So if I try and do what I'm going to do next and it's grouped together, it will not work. So we need to go over to our properties panel and ungroup. Actually, before I'm going to group them back up together really quick. I want to make them a little bit bigger, so I'm going to drag, holding down shift so I don't distort, make it a little bit bigger. Now I'm going to ungroup. Now I'm going to, with the selection tool, click and drag over all 3 objects. So I have my background, I've got my 2, and my 3. And I'm going to go to the Pathfinder tool and say minus the top. So now I have both the 2 and the 3 that were changed into objects, subtract it from this layer. So then you would grab your other 23 that you saved and add the stroke and expand and do your second layer. So remember to add your drop shadow and you're good to go. I cannot wait. I could put my name in here because, and I'm going to bring it, object, arrange, bring it to front. And change the color. I did have 23 in high school because Michael Jordan was my favorite. All right, so you guys have fun with this project. I cannot wait to see what you create, and it is going to be a lot of fun to grade this project. I hope y'all have a wonderful day.